So Rwanda is approximately the size of Maryland with a population of 13 million, which is comparable to Pennsylvania. Therefore, approximately 1,360 people per square mile. Colorado Springs is 2,510 as comparison, and then Colorado is 52. The median age in Rwanda is 20, and the median age in USA is 38. It's mostly mountainous with some savanna in the east. It is subtropical at 2 degrees south of the equator and incredibly beautiful. The rolling slopes of the horizon are breathtaking, but some of the stunning beauty is due to how extremely clean it is, as well as it is groomed like a garden throughout. Permits are required to cut down trees, but all dead wood, as well as often new growth at the bottom of trees, can be taken for firewood. So you simply see no dead foliage anywhere. Therefore, the whole place just looks like a groomed garden. Most of us know Rwanda because of the '94 genocide, known formally as the genocide against the Tutsi. The following 27 years has brought extraordinary development and movement toward reconciliation. Much of the reconciliation has come as a result of the country recalling who they were prior to colonization. They are finding unity footing through restoration of community development. They're returning to lots of old traditions. Umaganda is one of their old traditions that they've reinstated countrywide. The last Saturday of every month, for 4 hours, the entire country stops and cleans or builds houses or does whatever community project they've planned to do from the week or from the month before. It's kind of like an old-fashioned barn raising. They also get lots of information from the government, what's happening and what's coming and who's getting electricity when and all kinds of great news. Another example of the restoration of their history is Gacaca, which is their legal system. It's called translates on the grass. So it's a community of people, of your people. And that's how they used to settle, like if I killed your goat, we would go to Gacaca and the community would determine the punishment and the entire community would hold us all accountable. And that was what was used after genocide for some of the crimes. So IAC began as a church plant under the Anglican Authority of Rwanda. Bishop Ken Ross was very involved in the story of how American Anglican churches came under the authority of the Rwandan Anglican Church. In particular, Ken's personal relationship with Bishop John Rushyahana was a catalyst for why we are so deeply committed and grateful for the Rwandan family. For a detailed story of the events leading to the Rwanda church plants in America, read Never Silent by Thaddeus Barnum. As part of growing direct relationship with Rwanda and the U.S. Anglican churches, a sister church parish partnership was developed. Our formal sister church parish relationship with Kabale Parish of the Byumba Diocese began in 2007. The match was made by the office of Archbishop Emmanuel Kulini. Our first trip to Rwanda was that summer with a group of 16, which was too many, but it worked. In 2007, Kabale Parish was considered a sub-parish, or perhaps like a church plant here. It is now officially a parish made up of 5 what they call local churches and a parsonage, which we got to help build. There are actually 5 churches that make up the parish with a single pastor. The local churches are named by the hill where the little church buildings reside. Each has a catechist, kind of like a deacon, but with a bunch more responsibility. The 5 hills are Kabale, Rambono, Gitabu, Milku, and Ruhinda. The catechists are Rose and Jacqueline and Robert and Ferdinand and Ernest. Ferdinand and Ernest have been scholarship recipients from our education scholarship program. The pastor of Kabale Parish is Pastor Tadi, and Kabale Parish is in Byumba Diocese, which has approximately 45 other parishes, and each of those parishes have multiple hill local churches. So Lots of little churches all over because everybody walks. The Bishop of Byumba is Bishop Emmanuel Ngendahayo. When we started our sister parish relationship, Pastor Ngendahayo was the development director of the diocese. The bishop then was Onesphore Raje. In 2011, Bishop Raje became the archbishop and moved to Kigali. Shortly thereafter, Pastor Ngendahayo was elected bishop. To provide equity to parishes with educated leadership, as more and more young pastors are being educated, the elder pastors are moved around every 5 to 7 years throughout the parishes in Byumba. So we have enjoyed 3 pastors, Pastor Robert, then Pastor Justin, and now Pastor Tati. A note about Rwandan names. Children are given a Rwandan name at birth. Then, about the time of infant baptism for Christians, infants are usually given a French or an English name. Rwandese do not have surnames. They have a Rwandan name and a French or English name. You usually will see the French or English name capitalized, and the Rwandan name in all caps. We almost always use the French or English name because it sounds more familiar to us, and we often have a difficult time pronouncing the Kinyarwanda name. The Kinyarwanda is the name of the language, and the Rwandan name usually has a very strong meaning. Someone from IAC has visited Kabale Parish at least once every year, with the exception of 2008. It has been such a joy to get to know one another. In Rwandan African tradition, any new people that are visited are accepted as part of the family that has already been established. So we already feel known, even when new upon arrival. Some of the projects that we've gotten to witness and come alongside in development are the parsonage for Kabale Parish, the remarkable Rwanda Health Center, that's amazing, the most excellent soccer field, ongoing development of the Kabale Integrated Community Training or Thriving Center, better known as the KICTC, innumerable numbers of cows, pigs, goats, rabbits, chickens, hundreds of academic years of secondary and university scholarships, as well as dozens of roofs that actually provide new homes. Because when they put up a new roof, they take down the old walls and they build new walls. COVID needs have brought emergency food and seed supplies, as well as a new latrine for the church, the main church, and hand washing stations so that the KICTC and the church can open when allowed. The primary funding for what we contribute to development in Byumba and Kabale Parish comes through the Christmas with Rwanda campaign and the annual run or tandem run 5K run with Rwanda. It's important to know that we come alongside the diocese as well as the parish. We have learned the importance of overall community development. The last thing we want to do is cause the very kind of division that Rwanda is recovering from. We want to be sure that not just one parish in the diocese develops too much when others have great need. Rwanda pilgrimage trips typically are arranged each year around the Run with Rwanda in August, so some of us are there to run in person, as well in January or February. So it's a good time to travel, and it's during the dry season. There is a saying with travelers in Rwanda: folks rarely come to Rwanda twice. They either come once or it captures them and they just keep coming back. Most of us can give tribute to that. This is true for many people at IAC. Rwanda is simply so beautiful, has such a mild climate, is clean, friendly, and safe. It's just hard to resist. Some of the favorite parts of the trip are walking the 5 hills to visit families from the parish, worshiping and dancing together, eating together, running, walking, photographing the Run with Rwanda, as well as seeing the sights of Kigali, perhaps a reconciliation village, an amazing nature event, whether it's in Nungwe Forest, which is a jungle, or hiking a volcano maybe, or going on safari in Akagera National Park. Stories about how learning the Rwanda way of life has changed us. So that should give us enough material. Hi, Tom Carlson. Good to see you.
sorry, I was a little bit late. I realized I hadn't registered yet, so I had to
It's
like go through the whole
okay.
process and get set up. So sorry to be running
Well,
late.
good to see you. Great. So Andrew, Allison, and Sarah, you guys get priority. What's your first impression?
Like such a beautiful picture of what the church is supposed to be. And that's one of the things I love about IC is it's this constant reminder that it's not the church just here in town, it's the church universal and around the world. And I would love to hear stories from past trips and a little bit more about what pilgrimage trips have been like and that sort of thing.
Great. Andrew or Allison, what's up with you guys?
I guess we're mostly just listening. Like, I don't have any particular questions at the moment.
Okay.
But what you've talked about so far has been helpful.
Okay. Great. Okay, folks, why don't you tell some stories? Or Tom, do you have any questions directly or?
Me? Sorry.
Yeah. Have you been there, Tom?
I have actually not been there. I've been talking to people nonstop for the last like month and a half, but
Okay.
I've not actually been there yet.
Okay, great. Okay. Anybody want to tell some stories?
When Shira and I have gone there, one of the things that you really appreciate seeing is what's Shira's very favorite thing. She calls it walking the hills. Okay, so go ahead, Shira.
Oh, you can do your story.
No, mine is more specific.
All right. Well, since I don't want to stutter around, this was a day in a life in Rwanda, and it's written from the heart. But if I just say it, I'll stutter and fumble, and so I'm gonna read it. Sorry. So here is a reflection of one day of our visit. And it happened to be Heroes Day in Rwanda, and it's a national holiday. It's a day set aside to honor and celebrate with singing, dancing, speeches of the soldiers who lost their lives fighting to end the genocide. The Rwanda team joined in on a community gathering where Pastor Justin gave the opening prayer. We later visited the hills of Kabale and had a mass of children following us because schools were closed for the holiday. It's such a blessing and privilege at the same time to be invited into the homes of the Kabale parishioners. They would actually invite us into their house. And we're talking just this little area of a mud brick dirt floor with a little wooden table, and they bring out their Fantas, something for us to drink, which is probably well beyond their means, but they were just so welcoming to us. We were humbled to huddle into these small structures, hear their stories, and deep felt gratitude as they pointed to the new metal sheets that they might have gotten from, the IEC Christmas alternative Christmas thing. At other homes, we were introduced to the livestock received as a result of IEC's Christmas giving. Along the same trek, we observed water tanks and goats and pigs, a young man who had a different message of thanks. He explained in his improving English that he was so deeply grateful to God and IEC and his church that he received a university scholarship. In 1 week's time, he was going to do something he only dreamed of, and that was to go to university. As we rounded a steep path, we were met with a chorus of young children singing and dancing for us, with us. We actually danced with them. Our translators, Pacifique and student Emmanuel, who is now considered Director Emmanuel, he organized an impromptu greeting welcoming us to their village. To meet these families and get invited into their homes, I mean, it was just deep joy and gratitude.
And so the story I was going to add to that is we would go visit these homes, be invited in the homes, see some of the animals that the family has newly acquired, see these new tin roofs, the shiny new tin roofs. And now we're heading back to the day has ended, and the pastor is driving us back to our guest house. And I said to him, this is Pastor Robert, I said to him, Pastor, I've seen all these new tin roofs, but I don't know what it looks like before they got the tin roof. I mean, what does a damaged roof look like? What happens to the mud bricks when the roof is damaged? And he just yanked the car over to the side of the road and stopped real abruptly, got out, and he was taking me up this hill to show me a house that wasn't prearranged that we were going to go there. We hadn't been invited there. The people who lived there didn't expect us. So he's pointing to this roof and there's nobody in the house. Pretty soon, this farmer who lived there in the field with his hoe throws his hoe down. He comes running towards the house and he looks agitated. And I'm thinking, oh no, what did I cause? And he starts saying real in agitation, speaking in Rwandan, and I didn't know what I had done. And he's just speaking and he's pointing and speaking and he's being real emphatic. And I was just turned to the pastor and said, what? He goes, well, he knows who we are. We're Mzungus, they're white people. He knows that our church has provided tin roofs for people. And he saw us pointing to his roof, which was really damaged. And you can see the mud bricks deteriorating. And he saw us pointing at it and he was agitated because he said his neighbor needs it more than he does. That's what he was agitated about. You can explain that, Peg.
Oh.
That's their culture.
Mhm.
The most vulnerable are the most important, and we're only as strong as our weakest. And they just are so aware of each other.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think the story that I have to tell is really best told by Peg. But we were part of the 16 gaggle. There's a lot of people to get on an airplane and stay in a group. And we had a couple of wanderers, which you're going, come on guys, stay in the group. But in one of our last days in Byumba, Peg was meeting with the women's union, and she asked these women what their greatest need was. And the women said, we need wedding dresses. And of course you're going, and she said, what are you talking about? They said, one small, one medium, one large, 3 wedding dresses. And Peg asked, why? What did they say to you, Peg?
Yeah, they were giving this report and they were reporting on everything that the Mothers Union had been doing. And in this list, they said, well, we don't have any wedding dresses, and off they go to the next thing. And I stopped everybody and said, wedding dresses? She goes, yeah, we don't have any. I said, okay, you need wedding dresses? Yes. You know, one small, one medium, one big. And it turns out that in Rwanda and much of Africa, wedding dresses are rented and the men have suits made, which make all the sense in the world. But because of the poverty, mothers' unions would want to have wedding dresses so that they could provide weddings for the young women and men that could never, ever, ever have weddings. So there were couples that were living together, not getting married, but because they couldn't afford the wedding. And so if the mothers' union had these wedding dresses, they could provide weddings for them. And then, so of course, I'm thinking, how many American women have wedding dresses in their closets and garages and attics. And so through that, hundreds and hundreds of wedding dresses have been taken over, and they started a business. And so they're able to provide weddings for the poor, but also to make money by renting the dresses. And we've since gotten them chairs and tents, and so they can run events. But it all started from this little report. We don't have any wedding dresses.
It was just an add-on, and wedding dresses. And as I understood what you had said, Peg, that because the couples were choosing to live together, that there wasn't a real bond. And so dads would leave, and children, families would not be stable. And that was, that sign of commitment was helping to keep families strong, and to build the country.
Yeah.
I just love that story.
Yeah, they have two weddings. They have a civil wedding, and then, if they choose to have a church wedding. But there were just a lot of couples, because of the shame of not being able to have a wedding, they weren't having their civil weddings. And the civil wedding protects women particularly, so that belongings and funds, women just don't get left in the lurch with children and no income. Yeah, no. That's one of the things I think that I've enjoyed most about working in Rwanda, is you do something thinking you're filling that particular need. And then there's this domino effect. There's all these things that go on culturally, or as a result of, that we in our culture just don't understand. And that's why it's been so important to come alongside and listen to what their needs are, because they know the dominoes that get set off. And rather than come in with our agenda, which may be a one-off that they may or may not use, we feel good about ourselves, but it doesn't particularly help. That's probably been our best lesson. The most important words you can use in Rwanda is teach me about, tell me about. Anybody else?
Hey, I'm Beth. Michael and I had the going last January and February. It was our first time, so we haven't been many times, but we waited a long time to go with great longing. And one of my most poignant memories was when we
You just muted.
You muted yourself.
Are we okay?
No, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. We had opportunity to worship in the Kigali parish, and I remember walking up the hill, and as we got near, we could hear the music. We walked in. It was just exuberant. And the impression was just, I was stepping into heaven. The dancing and it was glorious. It was just glorious. And we were packed in there. We were just, you sort of shared a corner of a bench. We had bars behind us, outdoor windows, and we had little faces just peering at us, children's faces. I'm an educator, and so I was so aware of the kids, the children, and just beautiful. And the worship was just so connective. Pastor Ken was on our trip, and he co-led the service, and we had translators and communion and dancing. At one point, there were 3 little boys who received chickens as a part of the service, where that was their gift to be able to go home and have responsibility and to be able to help work and be a part of their families and as contributors. And we, as a little team, and we were a fairly small team, walked the hills, and as Peg and Jeremiah and Sherry described, as we walked the hills and visited so many different individuals and families, one of the things we started doing was just spontaneously singing the peace song, which we sang today at the end of the service. And it's just, I mean, today I heard it and I just started weeping, because it's such an expression of the unity. And as Peggy so eloquently put, just that so much that we received from our brothers and sisters there. And I would say that's what impressed me the most, is how much they taught us. Such humility, such gratitude for every little thing, and such a graciousness about how they both receive and give. And I thought, I want to be just like that. Do we need to mute again?
On the lighter side, we arrived, one of the first experiences that I had in the guest house was the monkeys running over the metal roof the first thing in the morning, which was, I don't know where I am. And the second sound was hearing the cadence of boots running on. The military was having a drill just up the hill. And it wasn't, I mean, we went in 07 and had really steeped ourselves, have none of us, well, Ken Ross had been, but I think he was the only one and you had been, Peg had been with John Rusciana. And so we had steeped ourselves in films and reading and trying to have somewhat of a basic understanding. And hearing those boots and cadence again it was very disconcerting. And I think it put me, rather than putting me in a bad place, it put me in a good place, because this is not Kansas. Toto, we are not in Kansas. And that was good for me.
One of the things that I enjoyed the most was participating in the run in Rwanda. It really was the run for Rwanda that Gary and I came to in Colorado Springs a few times before we ever joined IAC. It was the run for Rwanda that kind of introduced us to IAC. And so it was really exciting when we got to run it in Byumba. However, Byumba is about 1,000 feet higher than here, isn't it? And their course, it seemed that day it was all uphill. And
it is.
And it is. And so I kept falling farther and farther behind. And they kind of assigned these teenage girls to run with me. And so I finally, I jog a little. I kind of slowed down, and all of a sudden this woman grabbed my hand and she wouldn't let go. And so she and I finally crossed the finish line together. Even the police car behind us passed us. But it was just such a fun feeling of solidarity that we would cross the line together. And then when we were back, we were connected with some Rwandan students through the navigators that were in Colorado Springs for the summer. And so we brought them to the run here in Colorado Springs. And I said, you have to hold my hand to cross the finish line. And so the run really does unite both sides. It is a big deal over there, this run. You know, people get prizes that are substantial, and it's a big giant party. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and people come from all over the country. Yes, Beth? I mean,
they're not allowed to compete. They have to, the first year, professionals were coming to get the money.
right,
And
but
so,
authorities were coming.
authority, oh yes, it's a big deal. It's always on the national news, and there are officials at every level that come to the event. Yeah.
Dave, you're going to say something?
Well, y'all heard you've heard my blue jean story before. I won't repeat that, but I remember we were visiting one of the villages, and as I recall, there was kind of the road or path, and as I recall, the fields were up a little higher, almost like they're terraced above the road, and then they cut these paths level with the road that go off into these fields, and we're walking along, and I was kind of by myself, and all of a sudden this little extremely black Rwandan kid, probably about 4. And we ended up not too much further apart than Jan and me. He just popped out. And I was told later that he probably had never seen a Mazunga before. And his eyes got about that big, and he let out a scream, and just like a shot, he was screaming until he was out of sight down that path. I never saw him again, but I've always wondered what kind of psychological damage I did to this little kid, because he just couldn't handle it. But also I remember that some of the kids, you could tell the ones that had never seen white people, because they'd come up and rub your arm or something. And I found out they wanted to see if the white rubbed off, because they just didn't have a clue about the pale faces. But that was a funny time for me with that little kid.
Use your microphone,
So here's a fun story. On that very first trip, one of the things that the group did, this is the 2007 trip with the 16 people. One of the things we did was we did like a vacation Bible school, kind of a half-day thing in each of the local churches. And I don't remember which particular hill we were on, but after the main event had happened and people were milling around and playing games, and the Mzungus were getting mobbed by the little kids and stuff, one of the ladies who was an organizer of the event wanted to show me something, and she was very, very insistent upon it. And I didn't feel right about leaving the group and stuff, but she just said, it's just there, come. It's just there. And all of this, she speaks no English and I speak no Kinyarwanda, but we got the idea. And so I followed her, and just there turned into maybe a kilometer up the road, a walk to get to her house. And she showed me her little plot of garden and her little animals, and the house that she lived in by herself. She was single, and I don't know if she was widowed or what. But what she wanted to show me was a poster hanging on the wall in her little living space. And it's a tiny little room in a tiny little house, but proudly placed in the position of honor is this poster that's from the genocide time, for just after the genocide time. And she points at this child who's the center of attention in this poster, and she said, "That's me." And this is a UNHCR refugee official poster, and she's saying, "I am the poster child for the Rwandan genocide. That's me." And I got the message, and it was like, okay, life has returned to this place, but the history is just not that far back. And the memories are so very real, and the people live with such very real pain and trauma in their lives. And so I never did get the story about, was she married? Did she lose somebody? What happened to her family during genocide and all of that stuff. But the funny part about this story is right next to that poster of her as the poster child for the genocide is a poster of a British football club. I can't remember if it was Arsenal or one of those British clubs. And I said, "What's this?" And she said, "Oh yeah, she's a big fan. Yeah. She's very excited about this football club." And I thought, okay, well, there you go. There's the reality of life in rural Rwanda.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the language barrier, Mark. That was one of my most nervous things about mingling among a crowd of people that I would have a different language. And I found out it wasn't really much of a factor. One of the first times I went there, it was one of the Rwandese that wanted some Americans to come and do the run. So I went over there to do the run, but I showed up a week late after the run. And so a guy named Felix, who doesn't speak one word of English at the time, he set up a fake run. And I was so excited, and Sherry and I were on the starting line. We had the Rwanda, the race shirts on with the numbers on and everything. And it was on your mark, it said go. And there was a crowd of children yelling, "Mzungu, Mzungu." And I was laughing and looking at them right when the road steeply went down. And pretty soon I found myself, my feet weren't touching the ground. I flew and I fell, and I fell into a ditch. And as it turned out, I cracked a rib at that time. But I wasn't going to go all that way and then say, "That's it, 100 feet." So I got to brush myself off and started running again. But I couldn't take that deep breath. So I was realizing I need to breathe, but I can't. If I take a deep breath, it hurts. So I was just taking little breaths like this. And all of a sudden, 3 kids are running next to me, and all 3 kids are going, the whole way.
And they held your hand.
Yeah, they held me.
Poor Mzungus.
It's tough getting old, isn't it?
And the funny part about that is the run ends at the health center that we built, which is why we run. And so Jeremiah gets treatment there. And I've been with 3 folks from IAC getting treatment at the health center.
Do they have, has the government staffed those now with doctors and nurses, Beck?
They have nurses. Doctors are at the regional hospitals, and this is the health center. So it's the one right under a regional hospital.
And Sarah may not know this, y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but the government gives you land for free, an organization or church, and you have a certain amount of time, I guess, to construct something. And if you build a hospital, or maybe the same thing for a school, then once it's done, the government then supplies the personnel to operate it. So it's a really great deal for the local population.
Yeah, the land is given to churches to build community based things, and then they staff them. But you're still responsible for the upkeep and the infrastructure.
One of the people I remember most about the trip that Beth and I took was the driver. His name was Ronnie. We spent some extra time with him, and I would be talking with him and ask about his family. Some of his family was in Uganda, the rest was down in Rwanda. But I think the thing that impressed me the most was when Beth was about 17, he was recruited by Paul Kagame and was part of the first battle that they actually won with one rifle. And they invaded this place where there was a bunch of other guns that they confiscated, and were able to equip the rest of their soldiers with some weapons in order to be more effective in their battle. And he had a number of other stories that we listened with great interest. But there was a lot of pain in those stories, incredible pain. At the end of our time, as he was finishing the driving for us, and he was helping us get our baggage into the hotel or whatever, I came up to him and said, "Thank you for driving." And he gave me one of the biggest bear hugs, and probably the most genuine bear hug I've ever received. And he said, "Gary, I love you," in a way that melted my heart and my soul. Just a wonderful man. But through all the pain that he's gone through, his words had deep, deep meaning. They were incredible. So it was a blessing and a half, and the Lord used that in a big way.
On the first trip, when we visited homes, there were a couple of times where we saw things hanging on the wall. And one of the things that we saw was a doll still in the package that this child had received in an Operation Christmas Child box. They wouldn't play with it because the Joshua Onesfor was our translator when we were there. And they wanted us to know, or what he conveyed to me was that they wanted us to know that they took good care of the things that the Americans gave them, or that they received as gifts. So here was a child who had a toy that she couldn't play with, but it was hers, it was on the wall. And that, yeah, I didn't even know what to do with that information at the time. It was so, you know, you wanted to look at her and say, please take it down and enjoy it. I mean, somebody shopped for you and wanted you to have something, but it was more important for her that she was being responsible. Or that's what I walked away from that home understanding. That doll was not going to end up just lying in the dirt somewhere. She was taking good care of it. So it was an interesting mindset that I gleaned from them.
How about anybody have questions?
So you mentioned that we've sponsored a few people to do like university, to go to university. Are there jobs in the local area that someone with a degree could like get, or do they like move away?
You want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll take. So let me take a cut at it. Most of the university level education jobs are going to be in Kigali. There's a growing manufacturing sector and technology sector there, and there are some good jobs, really good jobs. Obviously, you want to have well-educated teachers, which are people that are needed all around the country. And so, yeah, there are jobs, and the government is doing, they're trying to do a good job of matching both educational opportunities with demand for the skills that are being trained in their universities, because what they don't want to do is have some university educated up and coming young person get hired away by an NGO or move to Kenya to go work there. So the government they're watching that and trying to make sure that there's, the water is rising as fast as that's not a good analogy, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Can you explain to Andrew the magnitude of the scholarships and what levels of education they go to, and how we're helping those folks?
Yeah, there's secondary schools, which typically are students going to private secondary schools, which simply have a lower student teacher ratio, and their materials tend to be a little bit better. And then after secondary, there's quite a track. There's a lot of trade schools. There's a lot of university level stuff. And so the church, it's the Kabali Church leadership team selects the students that get these scholarships. And a lot of what is happening is they make part of the program is just a commitment to their community. And so these students know that upon graduation, the education they're being given, that there's a lot of responsibility back to the community. And so they're educating kids in all kinds of different things. And the diocese and the area is being transformed, because as soon as these kids are graduating, they're plugging them into stuff in the community. And even the local and regional government, Byumba is it's kind of a big county seat for that area. And the government is growing there. Actually, the middle class is growing there quite a lot, because it's toward Uganda, and there's a direct road from Kigali up there. It's even turning in a little bit to a bedroom community to Kigali, but so it is developing well. And the students that we have been able to help educate are impacting that area amazingly. And the crazy thing is, Kabali Parish, I told you that it was a sub-parish when we started. And the area, the stopping of the genocide, the first battles came down from Uganda right there. So it's a place that has had a lot of hard things go on. And I call it a little bit kind of like Appalachia. There's a lot of, it's just poorly educated historically. And now I think the sub-parish, I think there are 2 or 3 people that had secondary education at all. And now it's crazy. So it's just been, we had no idea. We will never fully understand the impact, because the little bits that we've given, they've just multiplied, just like their animals. When anybody gets an animal from Christmas, the firstborn goes to another family. And so think about how many years we've been doing that and how many animals. It's just awesome. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Anyone else?
How long are trips generally when you go?
Typically about 10 days from start to finish. It's kind of dependent on who's on the trip and what kind of time they have. We like to try to be in country 6 or 7 days. It's a 2-day in and 2-day out. We like to try to go over a Saturday. That's a Umaganda. So Umaganda is for the whole country and the whole community. So when we choose to go during Umaganda and we show up with the Kabali, leadership, Kabali parish leadership to their community, Umaganda, and we try to work. We rarely are helpful. It's just a big deal that we would come on an Umaganda. They just can't figure out why we would come then. And it's a really cool testimony to the church, the local church, that all these Mzungu come and share in their time. So and then in August, we try to go over the run. And so those are some of the things that kind of determine when we're there and what we do. I, however, am able to carve out specific trips. If there are people that need to go for specific purposes and they need to be longer, I'm happy to host and introduce people and do a more extensive kind of trip.
As long as you give her a chance to go see her family and her grandchildren.
Uganda definitely gets tagged on one end or the other of that, yeah.
Is John Rukiana primarily involved with Prison Fellowship now? Is that what he's doing when he retired?
Actually, Deo does most of the Prison Fellowship work. John is doing national reconciliation work.
Oh, he's on that national
Yeah,
reconciliation.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's one more thing I might add in on a trip. Generally, trip leaders try to pay a visit to one of the reconciliation villages, to walk through the villages and meet with the people that live there.
Peg, how much of what you're doing is in Kigali specifically, and how much of it is in like Kigali or some of the other areas of Rwanda?
Most of the time is spent in Byumba in the Kabali parish. We just really want the relationship to deepen. And Kigali is such a metropolitan city, you might as well be home in some ways. I mean, we love to get to see the stuff there and get to, have some of the cuisine and some of the entertainment there. But our intention for the pilgrimage trips is to really see Rwanda. Since I've gotten to live in Kigali multiple times now, I'm appalled at how many Mzungu in Kigali, they don't have any clue what Rwanda is. They've never been in the villages. And I mean, it'd be like a New Yorker having never left the city. I mean, they don't know, they know this little bit. So we're just really grateful that we get to be in the homes of real people living out their real lives.
On a broader Anglican context, Holy Trinity Anglican up on the north side of town also has a sister parish and diocese. I think it's in the southeast. I'm not sure, maybe Mark, you and Peg might know, but they also have this similar relationship. It's just not quite as matured as ours as far as number of people going, but they do a lot of the same interaction and relationship building as we do, but it's in a separate diocese.
Are there still efforts, Mark and Peg, to kind of match up? I know that was Peg's heart's cry for a while to work on the sister church relationship. Is that still going on in the Diocese of the Rocky Mountains?
I'm not aware if that's happening at all. I've stepped out of that role because I just have worked on trying to do some more development in Byumba. Yeah, that was clearly a huge disappointment for me. I love what has happened to IAC as a result of Rwanda, and I feel like the American church would probably understand a few things better if we had a better understanding of what suffering is and its purposes. It's not a curse and it's not God's wrath. It's life. So if that's happening, Ken Ross is involved. And as a bishop, he's known as actually his papers are still in Rwanda. And so as a Rwandan bishop in America, he very much continues to work on those things. So it's possible.